Hi, I'm Corey, and I'm about to make you very angry. I'm going to tell you how to get anyone in the world to listen to you at any time, but the answer is going to make you angry. The way to get, I warned you, the way to get anyone in the world to listen to you at any time is to listen to them first. That's it. Listen to them first. I know, this sounds terrible. You're like, what? I don't want to do that. They're wrong. They're stupid. They have incorrect facts. They haven't read the same articles that I've read. All these things might be true, but you might also be wrong too. I'm wrong probably more than I'm right. Actually, way more. That's not even, but probably. I am always wrong. I'm wrong all of the time. Influencing someone is not about trying to make your case. It really comes down to listening to the other person and trying to figure out where they come from. Because only then can you come together in a new space, a space that's good for both of you. Yeah, you have to listen to them first. And the first place that I was introduced to this concept was when I saw an article, I think it was on the Harvard Business Review or something like that. And what it did was introduce me to the Behavioral Change Stairway Model. This was developed by the FBI's hostage negotiation unit and then made famous by Chris Voss in his book, Never Split the Difference. I read this book and I think it's got to be top 3 of books that have completely changed my life. It has completely overhauled how I deal with people, how I interact with people, my relationships, and it's made them deeper than I could have ever imagined. And it's also made me feel way more confident in meeting people and interacting with them. A lot of times people think that I like being around people or talk to them easily, but I've always had really, really bad social anxiety. I always want to have the best thing to say, the perfect thing to say, make them laugh. Goodbyes always make me nervous. I always want to have a good goodbye. Zoom goodbyes kill me. When you can't click off fast enough and you're like, goodbye, okay, goodbye, it's getting awkward, I can't, you gotta look down but click at the same time, goodbye, I hate it. All that being said, this book has completely changed the way that I talk with people and gives me a measure of confidence that I never thought possible. When we get more into this here, some people would say this is manipulation. But Chris Voss in this book goes on over and over and over to make it clear that it's not about manipulation, it's about connection. Over and over and over, it's about connection. People want their agency. They don't want to be manipulated. And good luck getting someone to do what you want them to do if they don't like you or if they're not into what you're talking about. I mean, all you have to do is look at a Facebook message board is that what it's called? A message board? A post. just look at Facebook's posts. And in less than a minute, I'm sure you could find something where people are going nuts, yelling at each other with the caps lock and angry emojis. I don't know if a Facebook argument has ever won anyone over. Has it? I don't know. That should be an Instagram page of Facebook arguments that turned into connection. And this connection isn't about agreeing with the other person. You don't have to agree with what they are thinking or feeling or believing. It's about trying to put yourself in their shoes and understand where they might be coming from. You have to really try and make that effort, because if you don't, they won't trust you to make a deal. They won't want to make a deal with you. Who do you like making deals with that you don't like? And if you can't find a way forward, then you don't want to make a deal with this person anyway. He says in this book that no deal is better than a bad deal. And when I first read it, I'm not sure I agreed with that. But the more you think about it, it rings true. And if it's a bad deal, it's most likely going to fall apart anyway and waste energy and time and resources. And that's where the title of the book comes from. Never split the difference. Never split. If you have a difference, don't split it. You don't want to just do that compromise, because in reality, in great negotiation, and I mean great negotiations for both sides, compromise is not where you want to end up. We're taught growing up that, oh, you got to compromise with your little brother, or, compromise when you're in elementary school, or compromise when you're at work with your boss. But a lot of the times that just leaves both people half angry or half sad or half happy. It's not a full 100% happy agreement. And that's what this book gets down to, is that if you are able to really understand where the other side comes from, you can make your deal their idea, and you can figure out a way to make it happen and to have it be something that both of you want. So this behavioral change stairway model was developed by the FBI. And when I first read this stuff, it blew my fucking mind, because it seemed like a magic key. And when I started trying it, it blew my fucking spirit away, my body. When I saw how it started working, I was flabbergasted. I was speechless, because it's really like magic. It is like sorcery. And it's not something that only works with barricaded criminals with rifles and hostages. It's something that works in everyday experiences, like when you're in line at Starbucks. So there are 5 steps with this model. You cannot skip any of them. As you get more advanced, you can kind of group them together and move forward. And sometimes one step will take a lot longer, or as you get better at the steps, they'll compress, they'll be shorter steps. But in the beginning, it'll feel a bit unnatural, or like they're big steps, or that it takes a while. The secret to getting anyone in the world to listen to you is to listen to them first. And active listening is the first step. You have to listen to them and make sure that they're aware that you are listening. And there are many different techniques and ways in which to do this. The strongest 2 that are always recommended are what's called labeling and mirroring. And so when somebody's speaking to you and telling you their side, and you're asking them about it, you're showing interest, you're actively listening, that doesn't just mean like, yeah, whoa, yeah, go on. Those are called encouragers, and they're nice, and they're a vital part of active listening, but they don't go all the way necessarily in making somebody feel understood. And I'm like heard and then understood. Like heard, it could just be like, yeah, you heard me, but like, did you hear me? Like, I see you, but do you see me? Avatar. When you make sure that they know that you understand them, that's really hearing somebody. So a label is when, after somebody finishes their statement, you say, it sounds like, or it looks like this. Like someone saying, oh, I just hate the Philadelphia Eagles because they're quarterbacks. What? Well, you could say like, well, it sounds like you're really upset with the coaching staff. To which they would reply, yeah, the coaches don't know, the quarterbacks. Anyway, that's what a label is, because you're labeling, you're giving what they've said a label. And it's okay if they say no, because they'll usually clarify for you. And if they say yes, that's even better, because you're on the right track of actually understanding what they have to say. So that's a label. And you use a word like sounds like. I like to say use a sense verb, like it sounds like, it looks like, it feels like, it tastes like. That's kind of weird. But usually it sounds like, or even it seems like. The reason why you use words like that is because if they do disagree, you can be like, oh, yeah, that's okay. It just sounded that way. And then they can be like, oh, well, no, it's this, it's this. A label can be tricky because it's that 2-degree difference between it sounds like and it is. Because if they say something about the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know why I'm using them right now. I know why. I was just watching a video of these singers and they were from Philadelphia, so that's why it came into my head. If you don't use a softener like seems like or feels like or looks like or sounds like, and you just go in for the kill, if you're wrong, sometimes people can get offended. It can kind of paint them in a corner if you don't do it in the right way. Like if they said, oh, I'm mad about Philadelphia's quarterbacks, and I say, you hate the coaching staff. And they're like, no, I don't. Why would you say that, bro? Gah. And then you're having disconnect. So one way is labels like that, and then the other way is mirrors, which is self-explanatory. If he says, I am angry with the Philadelphia Eagles quarterbacks, and I know that usually a team just starts one quarterback, but like, let's say all the quarterbacks, like he's got an issue with all of the quarterbacks, and all of them from the past, like Randall Cunningham back in the day, Super Tecmo Bowl. Dun, dun. Nope, that's NHL 94. Also a great game. Lots of great games. Anyway, for those people who don't give a shit about sports, all I'm saying is a mirror would be like, other person says, I'm mad at the Philadelphia Eagles quarterbacks. All you would do is repeat quarterbacks with an upward inflection, asking a question. That's a mirror. Quarterbacks? They say, yeah, the quarterbacks. You know, I just can't stand all of them. From the present to the past. I can't stand it. And then another mirror to that could be like, you can't stand it? Yeah, it just makes me mad. It makes me like, they'll go on. Now, when I say that, you're probably thinking, if I just repeat the last word that people say over and over, they're gonna think I'm a lunatic. But when you mix mirrors and labels together, it really opens people up. It seems like this stuff would make people like jump out of their skin and get mad at you and be like, why are you repeating what I say? What's so magical about this is that even if people catch on somehow that you're like trying techniques with them, they don't get mad because you are actually trying to listen to them. How often do you talk to somebody and they actually try and listen and understand and communicate with you and back to you and ask you more questions about your feelings and what you're thinking? Like, when does that happen? What friends do you have or family members that actually do that on a consistent basis? It's hard to find. It's rare. So if you run into somebody and you give them that, it's magic. I'm telling you, it is fucking magic. And that magic is empathy. So that's the second step. Active listening is the first step. Empathy is the second step. Empathy, it's not having to agree with what they're saying. They could be a lunatic with dangerous, stupid ideas, but you can still have empathy for them and their ideas. You do not have to agree, but empathy is about trying to understand where they are coming from, why they would think that way. You don't have to think that way. They think that way. And they probably think they're right, just as the same way that you think you're right. This reminds me of a topic that I learned about early on when I was learning how to play poker. I'm still learning how, but it's called the law of subjective rationality. And what that means is our experience is subjective. It is what we see and what makes sense to us, what's rational to us. And it could be way different than somebody else. And the example that this poker book used, The Psychology of Poker by Alan Schoonmaker, the example he used in the book was someone going and shooting a gun, going to a bank and shooting people. To us and to it's devastating and it's super sad and scary. But to that person, he might be seeing a bunch of killer aliens around him, and he needs to eliminate them to save the human race. Now, objectively, that is not what's happening. He is hurting innocent people, but subjectively, to him, in his reality, in his mind, he is seeing this situation where he's a hero. And that's a tough thing to think about, but it's extremely important when negotiating with people from low stakes to high stakes. Chris Voss, FBI hostage negotiator, dealing with threats all around the world, dealing with people who are like this. And people, they don't have to be mentally deranged for their subjective realities not to make sense. I mean, just walk down the streets of LA and you're gonna see some interesting people with some subjective realities. Walk anywhere. People are weird. We are weird. I'm weird. I am weird. And that's okay. But this empathy is where you're trying to figure out where they are coming from. Because if you can figure out where they're coming from, you can better evaluate and get an idea of what their motives are and what their motivations are and what their intentions are. The third step is rapport. So empathy is what you feel when you are trying to understand where somebody else is coming from. Rapport is where they feel it back. They see that you are making the effort to understand and that you are understanding. Again, it doesn't have to be agreeing, but you are making the effort to respect what they are saying, even if it's absolute lunacy. You are making the effort to respect what they're saying. And this might make you angry. Maybe you're like, yeah, I don't have to respect what they're saying if they're a murderer. And yeah, if the police can get them and take them to jail, yeah, you don't have to, you shouldn't have to. The justice needs to be served. But if you're in a situation that they have people hostage, you got to figure out a way to make this work. Otherwise, people are going to get hurt or die. That's something that's so amazing about how this works is you can extrapolate it down into everyday scenarios and it makes for much richer relationships. It reminds me a lot of imago therapy. I think I'm saying that correctly. Imago therapy is a couples therapy technique that strives to turn conflict into opportunities for healing. Sounds a lot like a negotiation. So rapport is when they start to feel it back, and this is when they start to trust you. And what's talked about in the book a lot is as you're working this behavioral staircase model of influence, you want to be listening for a couple magical words. And some magical phrases or words are yes, or that's right, or that's correct, or exactly. When people start saying these things, that's when you know that the rapport is forming. They are seeing that you get where they're coming from. And slight caveat, you're right is different than that's right. Think of this, like if you're having an argument with someone or a heated conversation, and they just say, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. What does that feel like? What does that sound like? You say that when you're ready to be done. You're done listening. The other person is done listening to you. Yeah, you're right. Fine. You're right. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Now contrast that with that's right. That's right. Now you're together. You're together. And again, this doesn't mean agreement. It means seeing each other. And that reminds me of a quote from the 13th century poet Rumi. I think that's how you say it. Rumi. And the quote is, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. We all want to be right. We all believe we're right. It seems like it's deeply connected to our ego that what we think, what we feel, what we believe is right. Because we think about it, we live it, we've lived it. And unfortunately, that's not going to match up with every single person that we encounter. Everyone's had different experiences, different lives that have brought them to the point where they're at. And sure, maybe you've never had a bad experience with koalas before, but maybe someone's whole family was mauled by koalas, and that's why they don't like koalas. And they have a good reason to not like koalas. You think they're friendly? They've seen otherwise. Are koalas dangerous? Are koalas dangerous to humans? Don't they have herpes? Isn't that basically the only thing they can do wrong to koalas or to humans? Are koalas dangerous, Google? Koalas in general are not dangerous unless they feel threatened. If they are stressed or scared by a human, they can chase them up to a long distance and then bite and scratch them with the help of their long, sharp front teeth and sharp claws. All right, so I don't think my koala murdering a whole human family thing is real, which I didn't want it to be. Cool. Dude, they do have some fangs though. Holy shit. Oh, that's Photoshop. The internet! Now we're on to step number 4, which is influence. Now you can start introducing some ideas. Now that they trust you, you can start problem solving together to try and move forward. And working together is something that's going to be mutually beneficial. A lot of times people think negotiations are about the cutthroat car salesman or the cutthroat big business tycoon. Yeah, those people exist. They are around. But overwhelmingly, most people hate conflict. Most people hate negotiating. And most people are willing to just split the difference or compromise just to get it over with. And that leaves usually at least one of the parties not super jazzed about the deal. I mean, just look at like Facebook Marketplace or using Let Go or Offer Up or whatever. Most people are just like, $20? Okay, good. You want 15? Good deal. Take it. Ha! That's how most people feel about negotiations. And this model, this technique can give you the confidence to move past that and to achieve something that's greater for the both of you. Great negotiating is about making your deal their idea. And this isn't about taking advantage of somebody. When you truly understand where somebody's coming from, look, in this negotiation, maybe money isn't the thing for them. Maybe time is what they're looking for. Maybe that's what they really want. Or maybe there's some other attribute, something you can add to the deal that is all that they care about. You don't know unless you ask and find out and do the work and listen. All that being said, negotiating seems to make up life, seems to make up most communication. We are always negotiating with the people around us. And I don't know about you, but I'd prefer to have that go a little bit more smoothly. When I first read this book, I was working as a server at a restaurant, and I hated it. I resented having to do it as an actor and writer and performer. I wish I could just work on that stuff all the time. And I dreaded every shift before clocking in. I felt like I was choking. With my anxiety, it was physically palpable. My chest would hurt and I couldn't breathe that well. I was deeply unhappy. But when I read this book, I realized that was partly my fault. It's my fault because I need to be more grateful about the things that I have and the opportunities that I have. And, I'm grateful that I can physically work in a restaurant or anywhere. Grateful that I'm in LA doing what I want to do. And I realized that I could also be grateful for the opportunity working in a restaurant to have a never-ending stream of science experiments. Everybody who walked through that door, I started trying to implement these techniques. And I went from dreading going into work to actually being excited about it, because with every technique that I tried, I saw just magic happening before my eyes. If you work in customer service, you understand that people can be terrible. They can be a fucking nightmare. But it can also be your fault when you let that affect you. If you let them affect you, you are creating just as much of a problem as they are. If I go into work with a negative attitude, of course people are going to have a negative attitude back. If you walk into a restaurant and the host is pissy, you're going to give them an attitude too, not to mention you're probably hangry. You want your chicken fingers now. Now, Cindy. How come they're getting seated first? We were here ahead of them. People get mad real fast. So I started working on these techniques, and I stumble a lot. There were times where things got awkward, or where I would make people angry or wouldn't quite work. But most of the time I saw the steps working and people opening up and being positive and becoming allies and tipping more. There was an interesting study that the book mentioned that talked about waiters using techniques for more tips. And the experiment was they had some waiters use the active listening technique of mirroring, so just repeating the order back to people, versus positive reinforcement, versus being like, I'll have the noodle dish, please. And you're like, that's great. That's my favorite. That's positive reinforcement. What this study found was that waiters' tips went up by 70%. They went up by 70%. And quite frankly, I lived it because I used to just give positive encouragement as I'm writing people's orders down. Always write the orders down. If you are a server, I don't care if you can remember 200 digits of pi, you nerd. Write it down, okay? It's not for your sake, it's for theirs. Because why would you want them nervous about their food coming out? Or them wondering if you remembered that they wanted cheddar cheese instead of pepper jack, or that they're allergic to almonds. You don't want them thinking about that. You want them to relax and enjoy. So just write it down and repeat what they're saying. 70% more tips, bro. Who cares about your memory? Get that money. And I didn't just stop at the restaurant. I started implementing these techniques in everywhere from the restaurant to talking with friends to going to Chipotle, and I saw magic everywhere. All of these times where I started using it, the experiences were better. People seemed nicer all around. I started getting free Chipotle, and that's not even at just one location. I would go to different locations and they would just ring me up for free sometimes. It happened multiple times. I'm serious. And I don't care what you say, Chipotle is awesome, okay? Every Christmas, it is a constant and spectacular gift card that I receive from friends and family that is always used and consumed. And I've never gotten sick there. So you don't have to agree. But whether it's your friend or it's your enemy, understanding is only going to help you. And no matter how hard the negotiation gets or frustrating, you always have to remember that the other person is not the problem. The deal is the problem. The deal is the issue. The other person is your ally. If the deal's going to work, you guys got to figure out a way to implement it anyway. So the other person is never the enemy. And this is coming from an FBI hostage negotiator. Although I suppose if you're going to get everybody out alive, maybe you're going to do some things that most people would consider unorthodox. And then step number 5 is the actual behavioral change. They act, or in the case of a FBI negotiator, they come out with their hands up. I also think this is interesting because I used to always worry about being fun or telling a good joke or a good story or keeping a conversation going. But the trick to getting people to like you, the easiest way is not to tell stories or to brag or to tell jokes. It's just simply to ask questions and really listen. People are always trying to figure out ways to fix things, but most of the time, just listening is the fix. And that might seem too simple, but give it a shot and see. Especially as guys, we're always trying to fix things. When people tell, oh, you do this, man, or oh, when that happens to me, I do this. Philadelphia Eagles. That's not even a Philadelphia accent. Water. That's water. Let's go to Wawa for the water. That water? Anyway, I'm from Wisconsin, so I talk weird too. We all talk weird. Except for those, what is that? The Atlantic accent from the 1920s. I mean, even that's weird. Basically, this stuff is magical. You become a magical witch. But not a bad witch, a good witch. A good witch who pines for goodwill and cooperation among all. This reminds me, I was listening to a podcast with Gabby Reese, the former volleyball player, and she talked about this concept of going first, where she always tries to go first, whether that's not like getting into the lifeboat first. No, like go first, like always give the first smile, always give the first hello, always give the first how you doing, don't handshake, not anymore. Always give the first wave or smile. Always go first. I mean, as humans, as less hairy apes, we like to mirror. There are mirror neurons in the brain where if somebody waves at you, your natural reaction is to wave, especially with smiling. If someone smiles at you, your natural reaction is to smile back. Our brains like it. It reinforces the behavior. And when you go first, you're giving people just a little bit. You're giving people the benefit of the doubt. And most people deserve that. And instead of shutting down relationships before they even start, you're opening them up. And that can lead to some magical changes. And that reminds me of a quote I read from Indigenous Choctaw elder and Episcopal Bishop Stephen Charleston. He said, "Sometimes in this troubled world of ours, we forget that love is all around us. We imagine the worst of other people and withdraw into our own shells. But try this simple test. Stand still in any crowded place and watch the people around you. Within a very short time, you will begin to see love, and you will see it over and over and over." That's beautiful. It's also very similar to the quote that begins the movie Love Actually. But what I mean is that to give people a little bit, to go first, to give them the benefit of the doubt, you are taking your step forward into this field where you can meet someone and maybe come together in a way that you never thought possible. These 5 things, if you follow these 5 things, if you walk with someone up this staircase, I'm telling you, magic can happen. And this doesn't apply just to negotiations. Use it with your relationships. Really try and understand where your best friend is coming from, where your spouse is coming from, where your brother is coming from. When you really try and do that, your relationship will go to the next level. And that sounds like a good deal to me. Those magic changes. It's a song from Greece. All right, gosh, my brain is weird.